Hello and welcome to MOTH News Live. My name is Keith Walsh, and in our ongoing series on failures in Ireland's care system, we've heard the stories of families who've lost loved ones in circumstances that were not just tragic but preventable. And we're going to keep going with this series because, these are important stories, and just to try and push them out further, because a lot of these people have spoken already and shared their stories. And here at MOTH News, we're just trying to keep the stories out there, get a bit of momentum going for the families, and to see if we can make a difference. We've heard the stories of families who lost loved ones in circumstances, as I said, that weren't just tragic but preventable. And today's story is one of those. Tonight, I'm joined by Allison McCarthy, whose mother, Alice Donovan, died in Mercy University Hospital in Cork during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in January 2021. For over 2 years, Alison has fought to uncover the truth about her mother's final days, why she was moved from ward to ward, why she made a 999 call from her hospital bed out of fear, and why she was left to die without her family by her side. The Ombudsman report has now confirmed many of the family's worst fears, and while the hospital has apologised, the wounds remain deep. Alison, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. And look, there's so many of these stories, and look, I really appreciate it. It's got to be hard to be speaking out, and I really appreciate it. Alison, could you start by telling me just a little bit about your mum, Alice, and what she was like before she went into hospital?
My mum Alice was isolated by all of us. She was 78, but she was not 18. She was very young at heart. She loved her garden, she loved flowers and planting. She had a great outlook on life, Her family were her world. She was never apart from me. She was like a member of my own immediate family, I had 3 kids, but she was my 4th. And I always put her first. That she was idolised, and any time she did go to hospital, which she had suffered with COPD, she would be out within a couple of days. She just needed an antibiotic intravenously, and she'd come back up to my home again. Now, she didn't live with me, but she would come up, and as my kids would say, Nan lives with us, because she'd stay all the time. We'd fatten her up, and she'd be an 18-year-old, she'd be full of life, a teenager. But I suppose the pandemic started, and she did very, very well. The first pandemic was, the first lockdown. She loved it because she sat out, she cocooned, she never left the home. It was very hard even for me to stay away, When we were allowed to travel, I travelled to her home. She lived exactly 5 kilometres from my home. I suppose I did her tablets and stuff in the rain. I never entered her house. I'd come down I made homemade biscuit cakes and stuff, and she'd be slagging. She'd say, "Oh my God, I'm after on a half a stone. You've stopped baking the cake," But like that, she was a simple person that just loved life, and once she was with her family, she was happy then,
She's obviously, well looked after, knew she was loved, knew she, cared for people around her.
That kind of a family. We just, like, every phone call ended with "I love you," "Love you, Mum, love you, love you, love you," Like, you could phone her at 2 a.m, she's awake, she's watching Jeremy Kyle, Gordon Ramsay, Judy, So, like, she was the kind of a person who could always pick up the phone. You could talk to her, she could talk to you, But every phone call ended with "I love you."
You're going to have me crying now in a minute, Alison.
Really is, Like, people would say your heart is broken. Mine and my family's pieces, She was actually never on her own.
And obviously loved company and liked being around people, sociable, loved the crack or the banter or the bit of goss or whatever.
She did, like, yeah. But then at the end of I suppose the first lockdown, when everything opened up in June, we had a mobile home each. So we went off for the summer, which was, brilliant. We had a great summer. But I suppose at the end of that summer, then the second lockdown came in, and it was different. it was a winter lockdown. It really kind of affected her, you know. Her test was at her. She had COPD, but with interaction with her GP, an antibiotic would, you know, would we. I remember on Christmas Eve, I rang the COPD department in the Mercy Hospital in Cork, and I said, look, my mom's chest is getting bad. I don't want to put her into hospital. And the words of that person I spoke to said, there's no COVID. She's fine if she has to come in over the Christmas. But like that, now I kept her out again. I said no. I rang South Dock over the Christmas, and I actually woke up during the night last night and I said, did he actually say that? I rang and I said, my mom's GP has put her on a strong antibiotic, and I think it's too strong for her. And his words, the South Dock GP said, and what do you think we should do? And I actually said, you're the doctor, so you tell me. So he told me to stop the antibiotic, which I did on the 26th of December. But she kind of deteriorated over the night. I knew myself that she needed an antibiotic intravenously. So she was happy enough to go in and just get the antibiotic. You know, there was no COVID in the hospital or anything. So I had to ring an ambulance that morning. We put down an awful night at home. And I had to ring the ambulance, and the ambulance came, and she left on her own.
That must have been terrible, just sending her off in the ambulance. I mean, because you'll have never sent her off before on her own.
Never. Now, we did follow her in the car, but when we got to the Mercy Hospital emergency department, we were advised we cannot go in. And I did say, look, we'll gown up, we'll mask up. And they were like, no, so they stopped us, you know. It was pitiful to see her coming out of the ambulance and going in on her own because the fear in her face, you know. And I was like, Mom, you'll only be a day or two, you'll be home again. And when she did go to hospital, she come to my home. Like, she never had a fear of the Mercy Hospital. She loved the Mercy. She actually did. When she'd go in, she'd say, they're sending me home. I think I'll stay another few days. She loved the actual visiting, the hour, you know, the visitors. She loved the staff, you know, she knew them all. But this time it was different, you know.
Sorry, just I'm turning my mic off and on just because of the sound, but it's fine, just if there's any. So you're talking December 2020 she went in.
27th of December from my home.
And tell me what happened between then. Take me through the I suppose, what the timeline really between that, and because it was quite quick then, wasn't it?
Admitted on the 27th of December 2020. And that day I got a phone call to say they were waiting on a bed and she'll be fine and they'll keep me updated. I think it was during that night then again I kept ringing and I got a phone call to say she was moved, she got a ward. But before that I had to go over with the list of her medications and stuff, but I went over myself thinking, okay, I'll get to the door now, they'll leave me in. But I wasn't left in again. I gave them the list of medications and they said, no, she's fine, she'll be fine. And on the 28th of December, I got a phone call to say she got a ward, which I was delighted. I was like, thank God she's out of A&E. So she was admitted to a ward. I think the ward was called St. Joseph's. Now, at the time, I didn't know it was a COVID ward. But on admission, my mum was negative, COVID negative. She did have a COVID swab that day on the 27th. And I got the text to my phone saying it was a negative result, which we were delighted for. We're like, you know, great, she'll be home again. On the 28th, which she was admitted to St. Joseph's, as I said, that was a COVID ward. Now, we were unaware of that. She had another COVID test, which was negative again. In total, she had 6 COVID negative tests. But that was on the 28th of December, St. Joseph's ward. So on the 29th of December, she was kind of, I suppose she's had a bit of delirium, been away from her family, you know, she was being moved. So she was moved to the St. Joseph's ward, as I said. And on the 30th of December, I was ringing my mum's mobile number, her mobile, and there was no answer. And I was like, this is strange, because she'd always have the phone next to her. So I immediately rang the ward and I spoke to a nurse, and the nurse came on the phone. I think she was a nurse. And she said, oh, right, you're looking for Alice Donovan? And I said, yeah. She said, "You never guess what she done last night." And I said, "Oh God, here we go. What's she after doing?" Because like that now, she had no filter. She was liable to say anything, And she just said she rang the guards. And I said, "What?" Like I was stunned because I said, like, that's not my mom, And the phone was taken from the nurse mid-conversation, by an understudy doctor. Now I do have her name. I'd handwritten notes from day one. I wrote stuff down, who she spoke to, who I spoke to. So I got her name, and she just went through my mom's medical situation, that they were changing this and they were changing that, and they were starting her on Dixoprem or Dix or something. It was they were changing that, and they were starting her on a sedative drug called Seroquel. No, I know nothing. I never heard of that drug before. My mum was never on any sedative medication. So I wrote that down straight away. I was like, what are they putting her on that for? So I looked it up, and it's really to kind of knock you out and zonk you. We heard no more about the 999 call because nothing was said about it, But that morning, I kind of got a sense, I got an intuition. I said to my husband, something is happening to my mum. It was 6:20. And he said, "You can't ring the hospital now. It's too early. If anything happened, they'd ring." So that's why I rang so early. But like that, I was told, nothing was made of the 999 call. So I dropped over some clothes and left them at the door of the hospital with her name on them. And when I came out, something told me, follow up on it. So I rang Anglesey Street Guard Station, and I just explained the situation. My mum is in hospital. We cannot get in. She made a 999 call during the night, and the guard said, due to data protection, because your mum made the call, the contents could not be shared. Okay, so I'm like, well, again, I trusted the hospital, as I said before. Like I said, if anything did happen and anything was serious, they would have contacted me, surely, So on the 1st of January, I rang again and I said, "Mom, how are you this morning?" And she said, "My leg is cut." And this was 2 days after the 999 call. And I said, "What do you mean your leg is cut?" I said, "Look, stay on the mobile phone," because I was on the mobile, "and I'll ring the ward from my house phone." So I spoke to the ward head, which I kind of found I had a good relationship with, because she knew my mum for the couple of days she was in, and she was my only form of contact. So I would express my concerns to her. And I said, "My mum just told me her leg is cut." And she said, "Oh, Alison, she nipped her leg off the side of the bed." And I said, "Is it, what is it, bad or what?" She said, "No, it looks worse than what it is." So I took her word again for it, So we were demented at that time. I said, "Look, one of us have to get in." I said, "The 6 in family, one has to get in." So I have one family member that lives with my mum, my brother Bob. And I said, "Please, look, under COVID restrictions, he's in her bubble. Can he please go for 5 minutes, 10 minutes? And she said, "Look, he can come in at 11 o'clock for 10 minutes. So he went over, and he rang me before he went into the hospital, and he said, "I'm heading in." I said, "Do me one favour. Can you get Mom's phone and just pretend you're looking for credit? Let's see if she have enough credit. And can you screenshot the time and date of that 999 call? So we have, we've something to go on." So he did. And when he did get in, all she was worried about was like, "Get out, you're going to get COVID, get out, So he left, and we just had a screenshot of the 999 call, but again, nothing was conveyed to me, regarding the call, or nothing was said about the fall, So I suppose that was on the 1st of January after the fall, and the 999 call on the 30th of December. Things weren't adding up then, I get a phone call to say, "Oh, she's been moved to St. Francis unit in the orthopedic." And I said, "Look, my mum is coming to me. If she's going anywhere, she's coming home." I said, "She has private health insurance. We'll get physio in place, we know." And they said, no, like, it was her chest she went in with, but they were telling me, "We're just going to get her mobility up and running." And I'm like, "But nothing wrong with her mobility. No, she slowed down, but we just need independent living." So I said, "My brother lives with my mum. My mother doesn't even have to empty the dishwasher or make a bed or even a cup of tea. She does nothing, she was ruined." I said, "Before any move, I'm to be told." So I was speaking to the consultant then, I think on the 7th of January or the 8th of January, and he agreed. He said, "Before any move is done, you're to be contacted." So, but I said, "Look, what are we talking? Is she coming home?" Or, he said, "Not this week, but maybe the middle of next week." So I said, Mom, you're coming home, you know, it's the middle of next week, you'll be coming home, another few days now and you'll be home. And we said, look, we're going to have a party when you come home. We always did. But like every day I'd ring, I'd say, is she coming today? Or she'd ring me and she'd say, they're sending me home today. And I'd say, Mom, I got no phone call, you know. And she said, please get me out, because if you don't get me out, I'm not coming out alive. They were her actual words. But like, I suppose the next few days then she did deteriorate, even though we couldn't see her. I knew by her voice and stuff, you know, she was getting really fed up. And some days I'd ring, she'd be like, she couldn't even speak, she couldn't say my name. And I'd ring the ward head and I'd ring the ward and I'd speak to a nurse and I'd say, I'm just on the phone to my mum, is she okay? And they'd say, oh, Alice Donovan is fine. I'd say, but she can't talk. She, like, did she change her medication? And they were like, no. So on the 10th of January, I said, no, something's wrong. She's after getting a stroke. Something is wrong. So I rang again, the ward head, same ward head, and I said, is my mum after getting a stroke or what's up? Because she can't speak, she can't communicate, you know. I said, it's frightening not to be able to get in. And they said, oh, I said, did you give her a different drug or what? And they said, we started her on a drug called Mirap, which is another sedative drug. Another name would be called Mirzapan. And I said, that has to stop. I said, she knows something is happening, because the following day then she'd come around and she'd say, what did they give me last night, you know? So that was the 10th of January. And she said, oh yeah, the team are coming round and we'll get it stopped. And
were they able to were they able to explain to you why they were giving her these sedatives?
This particular ward head told me they need to find a happy medium because she wasn't sleeping. So that particular day after that, I rang the ward again and I spoke to a male nurse, and I have to say, look, my mother's all over the place. Can you please tell me, like, what medication is she on? Like, I knew her medication because I did her medication. I said, like, she's not on any medication that would sound her. Like, so what is she on? Now, she was on, sometimes she would take a half a Xanax, say, 3 times a year, you know, and she's on a sleeping tablet every night. She wouldn't go to bed without the blue tablet, you know, she'd just put it into her mouth and she'd sleep like a baby. And he said, this morning she got a full Xanax, she got oral morph, she got a full Mirzapan tablet, a sleeping tablet. She started a strong antibiotic along with all her other tablets. So she was sedated.
She got those in the morning.
She got the Xanax in the morning, but throughout the rest of the day then she got the rest of the medication.
Sure, how is she going to be able to sleep if she's been sleeping all day?
On one particular Sunday, I rang, and like that now we couldn't get through. My brother would ring, my sister would ring, and they'd say, Mom's not answering her phone. And then one particular Sunday, it was 10 to 5 in the afternoon, and she answered and she said, oh God, we're all after waking at the same time. So everyone in the ward woke at the same time. And then she'd say, I said, Mom, look, we'll be home soon. And she'd say, you're not in here. She said, it's like a concentration camp. They'd come in, because I heard a nurse talking, you know, and I'd say, Mom, the nurse is in there now. She said, she's in, but she said you wouldn't see her again in 4 hours. So I suppose I did keep telling her, look, you're coming home, which that's what I was being told as well, you know, and they were telling her that as well, you know.
So it's almost like we'll just get through this, and you're trying to put the, maybe, you know, the information she's giving you and what you think it might be like in there. You think, I just can't think about that right now, but she's coming home soon, and then and as you said, you'd had the experience of her going into hospital, you getting her home, you know, her taking her medication, fattening her up again, as you said, and then she'd be right as rain, and that was probably your hope.
So I suppose this was leading up into the middle of January. And this time now she was moved again, like she was moved like a ping pong ball. She had 6 different ward moves and 10 and 11 different rooms within those 5 or 6 wards in 30 days. I'd ring, and
were they explaining to you every time why they were moving her? Was there like was she being tested for COVID? What was going on?
I never knew she was getting COVID tests until I got a message from my phone, and I'd say, oh, because at the time I was getting the kids, you know, if the kids were being tested, if I was being tested, I'm like, oh God, the HSE will say, how many people have she, you know? I was never told. But I'd ring my mum's phone, and then the phone wouldn't she wouldn't answer the phone. So I'd ring the ward that she would be in, and someone would answer and say, "Oh no, she's moved." And I'm saying, but like I said, if I was visiting my mum and I went to the hospital, I went into the ward and she's not there, like surely be to God, if she's been moved, like the consultant told me to that she might be to different, like I should be told. I'm next to kin, so I should be told. So I suppose she was moved to 10 or 11 different rooms within 6 different wards. She cocooned in her own home for the whole of COVID. We didn't enter her home. No one, you know, we stood outside in the rain. Mother's Day, we were outside the rain, waving in. So we obeyed every rule. And after that, I suppose it kind of brought us up to the middle of January, where she was moved back to this particular ward again. And I rang again, and like that now again, oh, she's actually moved again. But you see, what was happening? She was being moved to a ward, and then they put her in room 3. And then I'd ring again, and they say, "Oh no, she's gone from room 3. She's in room 1," even though she's on the same ward. So they were moving her. They said she might need a bit of higher observation, or you know, we moved her more to the nurse's station. And I'm like, oh my God, like she's like, some moves were done during the night. So the 999 call, when she made that call, she was actually moved during the night. So when she woke up, she wasn't in the same room she was before, and she thought then we didn't know where she was, you know. I suppose that brought us up then to the 20th of January, where I received a phone call from a consultant, and he said, "Mum's chest is crystal clear." Now, the same day she couldn't breathe. And I was like, "Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah, Mum's chest is crystal clear." And I said, "She can come home." So I said, because if it's, you know, if it's just physio. He said, no, it's just mobility. But I said, she didn't go in with poor mobility. You know, she couldn't run or she couldn't sprint. But, you know, he said, no, it's her chest is crystal clear. They were his words. And I had his name written down as well. So then on the 21st of January, it was a Thursday, she was all over the place. I rang like that. Now she couldn't breathe. She'd say, "Go off the phone, I can't breathe." And oh, she was all over the place. So I think it was about 4 o'clock, and she never hung up her phone. So she must have put her phone back into her pocket. So I could hear her pottering around, and I could hear her going to the bathroom. We were a full hour, because my kids said, "Mom, please hang up the phone. We don't want to hear it anymore." You know, she was panting.
But I can see why you just wanted to listen and get a sense of what was going on there, you know.
Yeah, there was a lovely nurse in the bathroom with her. And like, I want to praise them as well, because some of them were lovely, you know. There were a few that weren't, but I know some of them were lovely. And she came out and she was like, "Alice, this isn't your bed." I could hear the full conversation. And my mum said, "Oh girl," she said, "I can't take any more of this." This was on the 21st of January. And I suppose that night passed, and the following morning I rang again and no answer from her phone. And I'm like, that's not right, you know. So I rang the ward again, and they were like, "Oh, she's gone off the ward." She said she tested positive during the night. And I'm like, sorry, I screamed and roared. I said, "If anything's to happen to my mum, I'm to be told. If she's been moved again, I'm to be told." You know, like, no one told me she had COVID. And I knew that then. I said, "No, this is it." I knew it. I said, "She's not going to come out," you know. So that was 22nd of January. And she was moved back to Joseph's, a COVID ward again. Couldn't get in. I mean, I begged, I pleaded. Every ward head, I knew nurses. I was texting nurses, "Please, can you get me in? I'll do anything." So on Thursday, I suppose when she did get to the COVID ward, communications with consultants and doctors did up a bit. You know, they would ring and say, you know, she might have to go on Airvo, or, you know, she might have to go into ICU, but at the moment she's fine. We're going to give her an injection. It's like an arthritis drug that will help with the inflammation, and, you know. So I took everything down. I wrote everything down. So on the Tuesday, I think it was the 25th of January, I rang that morning and she couldn't talk. I mean, I'm like, so I rang the ward, and the nurse said, "Look, we'll put the phone to her ear and you can speak to her." And I was telling her I loved her. I said, "Mom, I love you. We're so proud of you." Like, but there was no communication back. You know, the phone was just to her ear. And that was the last communication I had with her until the Thursday. I kept ringing the ward. I rang the ward about 3 or 4 times. And on one particular, I suppose, on the Wednesday night I rang, we were frantic, like we couldn't get through. And 2 or 3 different times I rang, and I heard someone lift up the phone and put the phone back down. Like if I rang the ward, I couldn't get through. But if I rang reception, I'd explain, like, my mother's in COVID ward and we need to, find out what's happening. But on the Thursday morning, I rang again and spoke to a different ward head. And I said, my mother's in there 30 days without us. She's never apart from us. If this is end of life, then I need to get in. I said, I will do anything to get in. I said, I had COVID while she was in. I'm recovered. And she said, oh, that changes things. She said, in order for you to get in, you need to give me your PPS number. So I had to give my PPS number to go and visit my mother. 4 hours I waited for that phone call. I made 3 different calls to the hospital trying to get through. I said, I'm waiting on such a person to ring me back to see if I can get in. I never received a phone call back. And I rang again. I said, look, I got a phone call about 3:20 to say it's time. So I said to my husband, is it time for me to go? Is it time that she's dying? Or, what? So I got there. I was 20 minutes in the hallway of that Mercy Hospital, ungowned, waiting for someone to come down and bring me up. So I spent longer in the hallway than what I did with my mum. No, I'm delighted I got in. I bought a picture that my mum had with my 3 daughters outside my mum's door with her flowers. And they wrote down, love you lots like jelly tots. That was their saying. And I went in. The ward had brought me up. I had to gown up from head to toe. It was horrific. They brought me into a room before I went in. And I showed them the picture. And the nurse said, who is that in the picture? And I gasped. I said, it's my mum. And I kind of prepared myself, So I got to the door, and the door of the hospital, there was like a glass panel in the door and I could see her. So I went to open the door, but I got such a shock. Like, I wanted to run in, but I couldn't bring my body in to go in. I had to turn around and compose myself and then go in. So I did go in, and her whole face lit up, but she was attached to stuff up her nose. The machines were beeping. Her hands were black and blue. She had lost so much weight. She didn't have her own clothes on her. She had a hospital gown. Like, my mother was styled. My mother had Marks and Spencer pajamas. She had the best, She was like a Mrs. Bouquet.
Yes, I've seen photographs of her, obviously, in the article in the Examiner, and you're just like, yeah, she's definitely like she's full of lifestyle, all that kind of stuff. Just one of those women.
And I held her hand for the 15 minutes. I never let her hand go. I never sat on a chair. I never touched the surface, only her hand. I was rubbing her hair, and telling her how much she was loved. I put a picture down of my mum and dad years ago. A lovely picture, was our favourite picture. The picture of the kids, I left that on the table as well, but she just had this vacant look in her eyes, as if say, you're here. Oh, finally you're here. But I couldn't take her, So the nurse came back in then and said, I'm so sorry, she was so sympathetic, but you'll have to leave, and I'm like, how can I leave now? I said, look, Mum, I made an attempt to go to the door and I came back again, and I said, Mum, I'm going to go home, give the kids their dinner, and I'll be back again. And the nurse said, don't tell her that. She's going to be anxious and look for you. And the nurse said, this is it. As I've said, no more visits. So I had to leave. And I looked back 3 or 4 times and I'm like, oh my God. So I had to undress with the gown, with the PPE. And the nurse that left me out, the ward head that left me out, was gone. And another nurse came along, a lovely nurse. I have her name as well. And she saw me really upset and she said, it's okay, Alison. She said, you can get back in again tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, I said, she just told me, this is it, I can't get in anymore. She goes, no, you can get back in tomorrow. No, I wasn't questioning it. So I kind of ran out and I rang my husband. I said, I can get back in tomorrow, So I was kind of waiting. Then I was ringing all night, and the nurses knew me. They said, go back to sleep. She's fine. If anything happens, we'll call you. And I'm like, okay. So the following morning again, I woke up at dawn. I said, will I go now? And I said, no, I'll wait a while. So I said to my husband, will you drop me? So he dropped me at the door. And I remember sprinting to the Mercy, sprint. I got back in again. Up I went. Now the tubes and all this stuff was taken away from her because they were after starting her on a morphine pump. I did get in. I painted her nails. I fixed her hair. I stayed as long as I could. I did a Zoom call with all my family. I FaceTimed my brother in America. Like, I spent my time giving it out to everybody else where I should have stayed. I suppose looking back, I'm not that kind of a person. I would share it with everyone. I was phoning this person to say goodbye, and I wasn't telling my mum that they were saying goodbye, but I was like, look at her nails, and I just did her hair, and I moisturised her face and stuff. And I kept telling her how brave she was. You're a trooper. I never let her hand go again. And this nurse opened the door, and she said, you overstayed your 15 minutes in a loud voice. And I'm like, and then she said to me, where's your goggles? And I said, I'm not putting on goggles, because I said eye to eye contact is the only thing my mum can see. I had a mask, I had gloves, I had everything. I said, I'm not putting on the goggles. And like, my mum kind of looked at me and said, like, F her now anyway, but there was no sympathy. I overstayed my 15 minutes, so I said, my mum is kind of cold and she's on warfarin medication, so does she need another blanket or something? You'll have to go, she said. And I said, look, I can help, you have to go. So I went to the door to leave, but I had to look back every time. I made 3 attempts to go to the door, but looking back at her face, I'm like, why did I go? Why didn't I stay? Why did I listen to them? And again, when I left, that lovely nurse was on, and she said, you can come back tonight. And I begged, I said, please let me in. And she said, you can come back tonight. So all my family then were trying to get in, and they were all ringing, and they couldn't get in. I was the only one that could get in. But being the unselfish person that I am, I rang my sister. I have only one sister, I have 4 brothers. And I said, I'll step back and I'll let you go, And she was like, no, it's not fair. I said, no, I couldn't live with me being the only one. So she went over, and we're like chalk and cheese. She went in, and she played all the Sonny and Old songs, and she played lovely songs. She did, like, it was a different visit to me. And she left that night, and she said to the nurse, what are we talking? And the nurse said, oh no, she's going nowhere tonight, she's too strong. So I was phoning every hour. And I remember we were all sitting in the bed, myself, my husband, and my 3 daughters. We were sitting up. It was like Christmas. We were like, as if you were waiting for Santa. And I rang at 2:20 in the morning. I said, something is telling me to ring. So I rang the ward, and I spoke to a lovely nurse. Would I have her name as well? And I said, I'm just inquiring on my mum. Is she okay? Can someone go and check on her? And she said, the nurse is on her break, Alison. She's fine. Go back to sleep. I said, I'm sorry, no, nurse. Can you go and please go and check on my mum? She said, look, can you ring back in half an hour? The nurse is on her break. So I was counting down the time, and it was about 20 minutes. And I said to my husband, I'm going to ring again. And he said, look, give the nurse time to come back, down, up, and go back in. And the phone rang to say she's dead. But she died so peacefully. And I just had a calm over me. Like, my kids were shouting and roaring, screaming. I had an 8-year-old that was compulsive. She couldn't stop, and I'm like, I rang her back. I said, oh no, she rang me back at 6 minutes past 3. I even have screenshots of my calls that night. I have screenshots of all the times I rang. And she said, no, there was 2 lovely people. There was 2 people with her. When they went in to turn her, she passed so peacefully. And I'm like, okay, she wasn't on her own. There was 2 people there with her. I got consolation in that, So she rang me to say if we didn't bring over clothes, she would be buried in what she had on. So my 2 eldest daughters, Katie and Ali, went with my husband to my mum's house and picked out the most beautiful outfit, jewellery and shoes. She was dressed from head to toe, and we dropped those over to the hospital for her. But we could all come over then when she died. But I didn't go back over. I promised myself if I wasn't there when she died, I wasn't going to go, because I can close my eyes at night and remember my mum with a smile, I didn't want to be the last thing to see. So she passed on the 30th of January 2021. And I'm like, okay, she's gone, she's gone to a better place, no more suffering, no more pain. We can have my mum back. But the funeral home was another setback. It was just horrific.
You might. This is. I mean, I can't even. I don't know how you're telling the story, but I just want to interject just to give you a little break, because I don't know how. I can't see how. I can't see the timeline of events where you're getting to the point where almost like out of the blue they're talking about morphine and you're like, when did that happen? Like, what was the change? Like,
I mean, the funeral home was another story. Like, we couldn't touch the coffin, we couldn't sit with the coffin, nothing. We could do nothing. Yet we could sit around for 2 hours in with the funeral home director speaking, but we couldn't sit with my mother. We never saw the coffin in the funeral home. We were never let sit in a small room. We weren't let touch the coffin. Nobody showed up for her funeral. We never saw her laid out. My mum was actually called the wrong name on so many occasions in the Mercy Hospital, and she was called the same name over and over, even though it wasn't her name. So any communication I had towards the end, I was given my mum's MPR number, and the person that she was called. Sorry, no.
Oh, take your time. Take your time. Take a breath. It's fine. We've loads of time. Sorry, just you can start.
My mum was called the wrong name on more than one occasion, and the person that name that she was called died the same night as my mum. So we never saw my mum in the coffin. So at times we often think, well, I do anyway, did they put the right person in the right coffin? Because we didn't see her, It was a closed coffin. I asked to bring my mum home from the funeral home, and I was told no. And I said, look, somebody that died and is up on RIP.ie that died in the Mercy can bring their family member home, but we can't. It was one rule for one and one rule for another.
But you had been allowed to visit her after she'd passed in the hospital. Everybody.
Yeah.
But then the funeral home.
Couldn't touch the funeral. You couldn't stay with her. You couldn't sit with her. You couldn't touch the coffin. Nobody showed up to say the rosary. The morning of my mum's rosary, nobody showed up.
Why? Why could you not?
It was different. Like, I know other funeral homes that had COVID deaths and stuff as well. Their family members were left sit in the seats. We were left sit in the seat the morning of the funeral. But in regards to, like, I went down to order more flowers on the Monday before she was buried on the Tuesday, thinking that, okay, I'll get in now and I might be left sit in the room, sit outside the room. I actually sat in my car outside the funeral home to try and talk to my mum. So it was just, even though she was taken from us to the hospital and she died, yet we couldn't have her when she was dead. You know what I mean?
It was like you'd lost control. Other people had taken over, and you'd no say in what your mother did anymore.
But I suppose fast forwarding then, after the funeral, my gut instinct was going through all my own handwritten stuff. I was like, that's not adding up. That's not adding up. So I did an FOI, and I contacted the complaints department in the Mercy Hospital, and they just kept me on the long finger all the time. Communication was horrendous. They would go over the 90-day. They'd leave me there and not answer. I'd be the one contacting them. So any questions I had, I suppose I narrowed my questions down to 8 or 9. I had so many questions, and I still wasn't satisfied. So I decided to go to the Ombudsman, which I have a 28-page report from the Ombudsman that held the Mercy to 90% of my mum's case. So much so, when the 999 call happened, after she died, I went with my sister. I requested the call. Could I retrieve the call and could I go and listen to it in the Garda station in Cork City? The inspector was amazing. And we went and listened to that call. That call will haunt me till the day I die. It was horrendous. She was begging for us, And at the end of the call, all she said was, I'm 78, please don't forget about me. You know, she begged that guard not to forget about her, and he didn't. He rang the Mercy Hospital straight after. He was so much concerned for her welfare. He rang the Mercy Hospital and made contact with the Mercy to check on her, but they don't have any record of it. It just bypassed their system. I have a Garda letter stating that the guard made contact with the hospital to check on my mum's welfare, but they don't have any record of it. And when I did question, okay, you don't have any record of it, are you checking the right ward? Are you checking for the right person? So they'd say, oh yeah, she was in such and such a ward. And I said, no, she wasn't. You checked the wrong ward. She wasn't in that ward when she rang the guards. And they were like, oh, but what did she say in the 999 call? I'm not telling you, you know. So the call was horrific, you know. And the thing is, it was never conveyed to us when she did ring the guards from the hospital, okay, she's looking for you and, you know, she's distressed, you know, but nothing. But they checked the wrong ward for a year and a half. The hospital checked the wrong ward. So their communication, their investigation was wasted a year and a half because they checked the wrong ward.
So how long were you looking for information, like with the freedom of information and all that kind of stuff, before you went to the Ombudsman?
About 12 months. About 12 months. But I think as soon as I had the Ombudsman on board, anything they told me previously in an email and communication, it was different to the Ombudsman. You know, like when I did contact the Mercy, I said, Alice Donovan, MPRA number. Yeah. I said, I want it in writing. And would you believe I got a letter from the Mercy Hospital from a complaints officer saying, we're so sorry for the death of your mother, Mary. So
I mean, when they're getting basic stuff like that right, you've got it. Like, your mind must be going, like, I don't believe anything here. You'd no idea. Like, it's trauma upon trauma, and nobody is trying to, and this is the thing that I'm hearing again and again and again. Nobody wants to help. Nobody wants to make it better. It's protecting the institution over the care of the people and the traumatized and the weak and the vulnerable. It's the institution has to be protected. Jobs, people's names, people's titles, doctors, administrators, nurses. We kind of give them a pass because it was a terrible situation for them as well. And most of them, we know we're trying to do their best. And it's a trickle down from the top. It's a culture thing. And every time I'm hearing again and again, it was, lie, deny, make stuff up, calling your mother, not even knowing her name, but then being so sure about, what went on. You must have been spinning. I mean, how were you coping mentally? Like, what was going on with
I spent, I suppose, 2 years, I didn't sleep. I could close my eyes and turn a page and I can tell you what's on those medical files. I found horrific mistakes, horrific. My mum was administered a morphine pump and she was in the funeral home. She was dead 12 hours. And it's signed and it's ticked, care given as per plan.
how she was given morphine after she
Yeah, it's signed, it's ticked, care given as per plan. And the nurse's signature. Yeah, it's a human error.
I don't understand. Like I literally don't understand. Did they not know she was dead? Was it just like
it's a human? Yeah.
Like, how does a nurse give somebody morphine if without checking if they're
signature on the morphine pump? Not to. But I was
so what we're saying is that was somebody else. They weren't talking.
Like, so much so my mom's case was escalated to an internal management review. It was brought before many nursing forums. It was brought before the HSE end of life care. And as far as I'm aware, I was asked, could the report be sent to social services for the elderly? Now, I thought by doing all this, I want closure, I don't have it. Until
so you were saying yes, that's fine, yeah, do that you were trying to be helpful, and if they need this, if this is good and changes how things are done in the future, and maybe there's certain things put in place to make sure this never happens again, but you're still hitting a brick wall for yourself with regards to what you needed to know?
I was back in the Mercy Hospital. I attended the Mercy Hospital myself, and I did an operation back in October. And I went in and I spoke to nurses, you know. I kind of got upset going in because I was like, oh my God, I don't have to go back in here, you know. And they told me, even though I have an Ombudsman report, it means nothing. It means nothing, because they could bring me back down to the 3rd floor where my mum was and show me neglect. Nurses are traumatized.
So this is still going on. Nothing has changed. Nothing has been. So this is standard. This is standard care of older people who go into a hospital, and that's it. And they're not learning from reports. They're not learning from families saying this happened. And nothing is changing. And when you went back in, the nurses said, we can show you the same thing is happening downstairs. So this is like almost like a decision to allow people of a certain age to deteriorate. I mean, I'm just, this is just me, surmising, or this is my own imagination. What it could be, because you're going, what's happened
on yesterday, and I listened to that that horrific her dad's experience as well. But that was in the first wave. My mum died in the 3rd wave, and I did ask the hospital what lessons have been learned from wave 1 and wave 2. My mum died in wave 3. Like, when my mum contacted COVID, I wanted to know, how did she get it? And they told me this person wasn't the core person, but a person was admitted from a nursing home in mid-December 2020, and on cocooning and incubating with my mum in the ward. They didn't realise there was an active COVID outbreak in the nursing home. So they took a person from a COVID positive nursing home and incubated her with my mum and 4 others in a room when they didn't know it was a COVID outbreak. But she's not the sole case. No lessons have been learned.
No. But this is the thing that we're finding. The problem is, if you're going to deny, delay, destroy, whatever it is that they do, this is like a decision they make about these cases, that they protect the institution at the cost of the vulnerable and the sick and the elderly and the families of these people. Then nobody gets answers. There's no lessons learned. There's nobody's held to account. And we continue on, and we make the same mistakes again and again and again. And it must be heartbreaking for you to think this is still going on. Families must be still going through this.
That's why we need a human rights-led public inquiry. We need an investigation. You know what I mean? And there's no point having an evaluation unless it compels witnesses and like whistleblowers, staff members, families, carers. It's like we're an aging population, and we are aging. But
this is ahead of all of us, and this is how this is what this country is. This is how we treat people, and this is why everybody feels the way they do, because this is how we are treating our most vulnerable and their families at the moment. This is what we do, and this is the state of our country, and this is the truth, and this has been hidden.
Like, I'm no politician. I know, I'm well educated, but nobody needs to be well educated. This is basic. Like, I can see the nurses, I can see the staff. Our government have to come in and wipe it out. Put your hands up, have accountability, have a fully independent investigation that compels witnesses. We need our stories told, I'm in the process of getting my mum's 999 call in recording to put it into the COVID archives. I'm in the process of doing that, because I feel if this helps somebody else not go through what we went through, and like care champions, like, they have been amazing. I remember going to a Memorial Day in the Marina in Cork, and somebody handed me a mic to speak, and the words wouldn't come out. I could not speak. But Care Champions is an advocacy, a family-led advocacy group that have been a voice for so many, and that have given me a voice, And their main asks are like, if Care Partner was in place when my mum was in hospital, then I would be able to take the burden off the nurses and the staff and the doctors. I could see deterioration of my mum, you know what I mean? But you sign something, in you go, gown up, and
Yeah, say, look, I'm fine. I don't mind. I'll sign off on insurance or whatever it is. It's almost as if They don't want family members in there because of what they'll see. That's the only conclusion you can come to. Because why during COVID, second, third wave, why weren't they calling on family members to say, come in and help us, and we'll teach you and we'll train you and we'll like there could have been some, but it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. Like we were in Dublin last October, we went up for Memorial Day, and everybody in that room, you could feel their grief, We have a memorial wall, and every person that died, there's a heart on the wall. And like for every name on that wall is a loved one lost. And when you see it all together, you're like, oh my God, My mom's case is bad, but there's so many others,
There's so many, and it's almost like they're treating it as like, oh, that's an isolated case, this is an isolated case, this is an isolated case, and just trying. But there's so many and so many families affected. This is affecting all of us. Like every town, every housing estate. There's some like this is the reality. This is what's happening, and look, this will at some the government will have to deal with this at some point, because it will happen that people will there will be an investigation. So why delay it? Just deal with it. Put your hand up and go, we're going to do this differently than we did the mother and baby. We're going to be better. We're going to do better. We're going to learn from our mistakes, and we're going to make this a better country for older people and for their families and for the vulnerable and for people with disabilities. And all. This is, make this a campaign. Like, forget about the HSE and protecting the people in, what I don't know who they're trying to protect, the higher ups. It just doesn't.
Shouldn't have to fight for this, This is a human, like my mom's human right. It's a human right, you know what I mean? To be with your loved one.
There's serious human rights violations, and we need to be a humanitarian country and not. It's almost like it's a capitalist. Like they're worried about everybody be looking for something. Then let them look for it. Just let them talk and let them and ask them what they want, and stop burying your head in the sand. Alison, sorry now. You've been brilliant, and I suppose I don't want to keep you for too long. What would you like to see happening?
We need a fully transparent COVID inquiry. We need our stories told. We need care partner in place. But unless our government step in and fix this broken system, failures are going to be made going forward. It's going to fail everybody.
And I know if I'm talking to, actually, there's a message there from Care Champions saying, "Well done, Alison, and rest in peace, Alice." But I know from talking to Magella that that there was the word witch hunt was used about people looking for justice and looking for an investigation that has teeth and can actually do something. For the government to say this is a witch hunt is absolutely disgusting.
My mother was more than a number, you know what I mean? And she deserved, like everyone that died was somebody that was loved, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're people with families and people with lives, and they're not just like, oh, it was a decision made that a certain, like all the Cork people, should we just let them go, or all the, just like it's a number is just a number. Like it can't be used to decide that these are people we're not looking after. Like it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't work like that. Like that is not who we are as people. That's not what the families would. I don't think we don't want people in power making decisions like that on our behalf. End of story. Because we are not like that as a country. We don't want to be. And if they're making those decisions and spending our money on legal teams and confounding people and making, not making and pushing people away and denying and delaying and lying, that's not how we want them to behave. We want clarity. We want answers. We want people treated with care. That's what we want, and they've got it so wrong here by representing us in this way, and that's what they're doing because we pay them. It's our money, and this is what they're doing on our behalf as people. And we need to say that's not good enough, and it needs to be loud.
Yeah, like even our mental health in hospitals and stuff. It's just people are it's just overwhelming. You know what I mean? So unless this is sorted, like. It had a rippling effect on my 3 kids. I have 3 daughters, and I have an 8-year-old. And when she was 8 when my mum died, and I was crying one day, and she said, "Are you crying over Nan?" And I said, I kind of am, you know, because I said, leave it all out, don't hold it in, because, you know, no point. And she said, you can't be sad for Nan because she had a lovely life, you know. So that's how I remember it. When an 8-year-old tells you that, that can tell you how much she was loved, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you got that answer because you were honest with her, and she was able to tell you her honest opinion, and that's what we need in this country. And the greatest medicine against mental health is vulnerability and honesty, and being feel like you're being heard and feel like you're being listened to. People, I mean, you know, we do the darkness into light walk. We do, you know, people talk about it's good to talk and talk to somebody. These people like you and families and friends are talking, and they're being ignored. And this is the absolute opposite to what we need to be doing to our people. And this is people who are our representatives, who are supposed to be looking after us and looking after the people of this country and minding them. And they talk about mental health. And if another government minister says one thing about mental health, until they make a decision to be more honest, to be more open, to tell people what they need to hear. Like, there's other ways of doing this. To sit down, mediation, you know, there's a caring way of looking after people without being so concerned with the money and the, you know, oh, the floodgates will open, everybody looking for something. Let everybody look for something. It's okay.
So at the start when I was doing my mum's files and doing the Ombudsman, I was really, really angry. I was like, if I saw someone from government, I would actually, you know, I'd give it to him. But now I'm like, I know we have questions, but I have so many answers for them as well. You know what I mean? I could sit in a room with one and I could teach them something. I'm not going to be angry because nothing's going to bring my mum back. You know, I'll be angry if the inquiry doesn't compel witnesses and stuff. You know what I mean? Because the system is broken, and unless it's fixed, it's going to fail generations to come.
Yeah, and every day we're seeing stories come out, and this has happened, this has happened. These isolated cases, this is just how we are now. This is what we do to people. This is how we run the country. And we are, this is us. This is Ireland in 2025.
I kind of just want, like, I know now I come across, I might say, oh, the mercy is amazing. You know what I mean?
Oh, the staff are suffering. Like, this is not good for anybody.
Like, there was so much good. The bad outweighed the good, if you get me. You know, like, there was one particular nurse when my mum died, and I won't say her name, and she put up a thing on rip.ie. This is the only thing I can grasp onto that saved me, really. She said she built up a friendship with my mum, and when we couldn't get in, she held her hand after her shift. She stayed on after her shift on the Wednesday that my mum was in that COVID ward, and stayed with her and held her hand and formed a relationship with her, and my mum was relaxed, and when my mum fell asleep, she left. So, like, no one does that, you know? So I want to praise, well,
Yeah.
some of the nurses in the Mercy Hospital are,
Yeah, because the staff are people too, and they're having to deal with this, and it's ongoing, and it's still happening, obviously, with the conversation. Look, I just want to say, you know, your mother sounded like a wonderful woman. I'm so sorry this happened to you, because it happened to you on behalf of all of us. You know, this is stuff that's been delivered by our elected representatives, and it's not good enough. And you know, I'd apologise as a citizen of Ireland, and I hope that something happens, and I hope you get an investigation with teeth that has the power to make changes and accountability. And we're seeing it now with the hip scandal, and people are resigning, and we need that. We need to change. We need wholesale changes. We need resignations. We need people to put their hands up. We need to know where this decision and these decisions are being made to treat families so appallingly. And I thank you, Alison, and keep going. And it's hard, and I know it gets heavy. Take a break, come back again. You know, you're doing a lot. You know?
Thank you.
I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. I appreciate your time. Sorry, I just turned my mic off.
Yeah.
Sorry, just say that again there, Alison.
No, thank you.
Alison, thank you. I'll let you go. Really appreciate it, and I'll stay in touch, and we'll keep trying to get this stuff out there. And yeah, okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye, 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 bye. Like, is this how we want to be as a country? Is this what we want our elected representatives, our